what a lot of people in property and in lending often don't think about is that a lender's moment of success actually is completely aligned to a borrower's moment of success.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. And on this week's Property Education Masterclass, we're joined by the Managing Director of Roma Finance, Mr. Scott Marshall. Now, Roma Finance is one of the UK's largest and leading development and bridging finance development companies. If you're in the development game, you need to listen to this entire episode. Scott really lifts the curtain on what you need to know in order to get your development deals funded. Really, really interesting stuff in this one. Guys, if you get inspired by this episode, if this episode helps you to kickstart your entrepreneurial journey, I would please ask that you follow the show and leave us a review. If you've got any property related questions, drop them in that review. We may well pull it out and read it on our midweek show, the Airbnb Nomads Toolbox episode, where we're answering everybody's property related questions. Until that point, guys, get settled in. This is a long one, but there's so much to cover in the development world. So buckle in and get excited. This is a great episode. Here we go. Scott Marshall, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much indeed for having me, Alex. It's great to be here.
Mate, thanks so much for coming on. I am super, super excited. I know you are a very, very busy man with Roma Finance. So thank you so much for giving us your time to come onto the show. Mate, I want to get stuck into, obviously, Roma Finance, big development and bridging finance company, one of the biggest in the UK. You're doing some incredible things. I think you're up to, is it 60, 70 staff now that you've got on at Roma?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Amazing. So I want to talk about that. We've got a very, very dedicated, property audience here. So no doubt you can bring so much value to my audience, who are potentially looking to get into some of the bigger, more chunkier deals, and they're in need of that ever crucial development finance. Because as we know, money is the number one thing that stops people from being successful in the property game, as I'm sure you'd agree. So why don't we start, Scott? Take us back to the beginning, where it all began. I want to hear as well the really nice touching story about how you named the company, because I thought that was really, really nice to hear. And yeah, just take us back to the beginning, basically, and we'll start from there.
Okay. So if I go back to I suppose my roots, and this is kind of relevant. I did an engineering degree. And my family business was engineering. So I love the idea of creating things, making things, developing a product. It's all been, what I've grown up with. But quite early on, I decided into my working career that I didn't want to be an engineer. I thought I'd be an accountant. So I joined an accountancy business at Arthur Andersen. If you know Arthur Andersen, it was caught up in the Enron scandal. Nothing to do with me, I must add, but it was caught up in the accountancy scandal. And when my wife was pregnant with our first child, and I just got my qualification, I was all of a sudden facing the prospect of Anderson's going down, and I applied for voluntary redundancy. I didn't get chosen, but I left anyway because of money and what have you. Went to join a boutique corporate finance firm. What had happened there just before I left, this was 2002, I just reached out to a connection that I had within a much larger independent lending business around securitization. I'd reached out to this contact and I'd had that first meeting. Went to another corporate finance boutique. That didn't work out. I'm not going to go into the details why, but culturally, it didn't fit. That I wasn't a fit for them, they weren't a fit for me, and I was made redundant 9 months later. And at that point, I was stuck. And so I picked up the phone to that company that I tried to sell securitization products into, and said, "Look, do you want a bright, young, hungry person working for you?" I joined that business I joined that business initially as, well, the idea was I'd go around all the different departments, do a stint in each of the departments, almost like a graduate training scheme. My first department that I went into was underwriting, and I never left. And I went from underwriter to senior underwriter to head of underwriting to credit and risk director within the space of 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
And anyway, cutting a long story short, another piece of bad luck happened. The credit crunch happened, and all of a sudden, that business that we grown so successfully shrank very quickly. And whilst I had the title credit and risk director, actually I was just a highly paid underwriter. My position was made redundant, and I was like, well, what do I do now? I then had 3 kids. 3 young kids under 5, and I was like, well, what do I do? So I actually got a job. This is 100% true story. I got a job in IT, buying and selling IT hardware equipment around the world. But I didn't want to lose, and my wife really pushed me to say, look, you've had a number of pieces of bad luck in your career where things haven't worked out. You've been sacked or made redundant or fired or whatever. Because I'm quite a how can I put it? I'm not a good employee. I'm a better employer than I think I am an employee, because I like to have things my own way. So she said you need a contingency. So I actually set Roma up back in December 2008, in the month that I was made redundant from my previous employer, as a subcontract underwriting service for other lenders. I got my first client that I'd signed on a retainer in March 2009. That business now is now one of the largest lenders in the UK, a firm called Octopus Real Estate. But when Roma started, and it was originally called Drawbridge, then it became Dragonfly, then it became Octopus. As it was Drawbridge, Roma, I should say, in its early days, was their subcontract underwriting service. Okay,
wow, okay.
So it was a tiny little business, 2 people, so 1 guy and a secretary. They would send me, an underwriting file that thick, and I'd go back to them with a 1-pager. Your lawyers missed this, and that does happen, by the way. Not all lawyers are great lawyers. There are lots of good lawyers around, but some of them aren't so good. So your lawyers missed this, your valuers missed that, your QS has missed that. That's on the credit search, that's on land registry, that's at company's house. This is an issue. And so my 1-pager would say summary that summarised the deal. These are the main issues. Go sort those issues, and you're okay to lend. And I did that, or Roma did that, I should say, for 18 months. And on the back of that, they then went and built their business. I had the opportunity to join them. Didn't join them because I'm Manchester based. That business is down in London. They recruited another underwriter. I'm a good underwriter, but an underwriter's an underwriter. Okay, it's a skill set, and often it's an opinion in many cases. So that work started to dry up, and I was like, well, what do I do with Roma? And I thought to myself, well, I've been credit and risk director of another business for, I've been in that business for 6 years. I've been doing this work for what was became Octopus Real Estate for 18 months on a retainer. I know I'll have a go at lending myself, but I had one big problem. I had no money, and I had no deals, and I had no time. But what I used to do was I used to get in my car at lunchtimes. I used to drive around a corner. I used to phone my old broker contacts, can I have a deal? Can I have a deal? Can I have a deal? Most people politely would tell me to have sex and travel. That's another word for F off.
You're right.
They'd say have sex and travel. And anyway, cutting a really long story short, one day I got a deal. And this was November, and that's when it started. This was November 2010. A deal came in, and the first deal I did, it was not a bridging loan or a development loan. It was actually a secured loan. It was a second charge loan, and it was a guy down in North London. At the time, his house was worth about £700,000. He had a mortgage of £380,000 with NatWest. NatWest were lending him money into his business. He needed money to pay suppliers. It was obviously just after the credit crunch. No one had any money, and he needed 75 grand to put some money into his business. I didn't have 75 grand, but I winged it. And I think lots of entrepreneurial people, when they're starting businesses, there's often lots of ways to start a business. You can either put all the systems and processes and procedures in place and then try and go get business, or you get the business first and worry about the detail later.
Yeah. And I
Okay.
think a lot of entrepreneurs are the latter, right? They kind of go in. Nothing needs to be perfect. It's all about having the vision, having the drive, getting it up and running, and then how the hell am I going to make this work?
And that's exactly what happened with Roma. So obviously, I knew with an underwriting background, I kind of knew what good looks like. But again, going back to what you were saying, many people who are thinking of starting a business, whether it's property or another type of business, they often let excellent be the enemy of good.
Mm.
And I think that one of the things you've got to think about when you've got an opportunity is, and again, I don't know whether I'm allowed to use this language or not, but JFDI.
You can use whatever language you want.
All right. Okay. So JFDI is just fucking do it.
Yeah.
Okay. When you've got an opportunity,
So true.
an opportunity does not come along every single day. So this was an opportunity. It wasn't a bridge. It wasn't a development loan. It was a second charge loan on someone's home that needed money to put into their business. And at the time, this was November 2010. As I said, I had no money. I had no documentation. I had no systems, no processes, no procedures. It was just me. I sent that guy heads of terms for the loan on my
on a fact packet,
whatever. I had a bank account because I'd been doing all the underwriting work for 18 months or so. I asked for the legal fees, I asked for a valuation fee, I asked for what's called a BSQ fee, which enables a lender to go and get consent for a second charge mortgage. He sent me all that money. I got a lawyer to bastardize a set of docs for me, that someone I've known for a long time. He agreed to do that, didn't charge me for it. But I still had one other problem, that I didn't have 75 grand. And sometimes the stars are aligned.
Mm.
Okay.
You went out. Don't tell me you went out and got a bridging loan.
So, well, not far off the truth. Yeah. So I could go so my original idea was I'd go and raise the money from friends and family, and I could remortgage my house and put some money into it myself. And my boss in the IT business was giving me a lift into work one day, and he said to me, "Are you still involved in the lending game?" And I just thought it was a really, really weird question. And sometimes when someone asks you a question, you do not know whether the question is loaded or not loaded. And I just think that always the best thing is to be straight, to be honest, and if you've got someone don't lie, never lie, because if you lie, you get found out. Yep. So I said to him, I told him all the things I'd been doing for the past, what was then more than 2 years, or almost 2 years, that I've had this underwriting business and this and that and the other. And his mouth was wide open, because obviously I've been moonlighting on the side. I was in breach of my employment contract. He could have fired me on the spot for, gross misconduct and breach of contract. And he said to me, "Well, if you ever get a deal, let me know." I said, "Well, wow." As it happens, I've got a deal right now. He introduced me to his brother, who was ultimately his boss. His brother, his first question to me, I told him everything. His first question to me was, "Well, how much are you going to put into this?" So I took equity out of my own home. The guy who was my boss's boss, Phil, became my business partner in Roma. He gave me the rest of the money, and that first deal was done on the 15th of December 2010. And there's a massive difference when you are underwriting somebody else's money, okay, to when it's yourself. And going home one day and saying to your wife, "Darling, have I got an idea for you? I'm going to, increase our mortgage in order to lend money to somebody else secured on their home. What do you think? Isn't that a great idea?" Well, so she said, I trust you. Let's do it.
Mm. Wow, there's so many takeaways from that story, Scott. I mean, taking the risks, right? Starting the business at that time as well, around one of the biggest, crashes that we've experienced, in a long, long, long time. So, that self-belief. And then also, towards the end of that story is having ultimately that partner next to you that supported you in your vision, which is absolutely massive. And I talk about that all the time. I was talking about that just now in the last podcast. You can have all the drive, determination, self-belief, confidence, desire you want. But if the person that you're at home with doesn't share that and they're pulling in a different direction, it's never going to happen. So that was the start. That was the start of it, really. And I'll tell you what else is interesting about that is you're demonstrating how, people might look at you now and they're like, oh, Scott's got, Roma Finance, this big development company doing great. But they completely forget like all the grind and the hustle and the hard work when you was alone in your car, trying to crunch deals and get deals over the line and taking risks. People forget about that once you make it, right?
100%. And look, when that was the first deal we did, it was 15th of December 2010. And then we were like, well, let's get some more deals. And the second deal was, I could tell you a story about every single loan that we did, probably for the first 7 years of the business, where I'd be still working full time, so I was working Monday to Friday. The lending stuff was my hobby, for want of a better phrase, a cottage industry that I was trying to get off the ground. But I would go and I would meet every single borrower face to face in their home, and I did that between 2010 and 2016. Every single customer I met face to face. I used to drive to their house. I'd go and meet them. I used to take a portable photocopier with me so that I could photocopy their ID and proof of residence documents for AML. I used to sit with them, understand why they needed to borrow the money, what it was for, what they were going to do with it, how the money was going to help them, how they were going to service it or repay it, how the money that we were going to give them was going to help them create wealth for themselves. And there's a whole reason behind that, which was that my strength or my skill set was in underwriting at the time. I didn't have any skills really on the collection side or the recovery side. So I had to make sure that every single loan that we did went well. Because if it went badly, I didn't have the skill set to go and recover. Okay, now obviously it's very different now, but at the time you've got to really.
Sorry, Scott. So presumably at that time, then you presumably were a lot more kind of risk averse, because did the deals have to stack a lot more in your favor for you to lend at that point?
I think stacking in my favor is probably the wrong way of putting it. If I can, what I would say is the deal had to really stack in the customer's favor, in the borrower's favor, yes. Because what a lot of people in property and in lending often don't think about is that a lender's moment of success actually is completely aligned to a borrower's moment of success. Yeah. Okay, really, because we get repaid when the borrower successfully sells the product at the end or successfully refinances at the end of a project. So and again, what a lot of people in our space in particular also fail to think about is that when you are lending somebody money, you are lending, and whether it's a limited company or individuals, it's the same thing. You are backing individuals that are doing something with the money you're giving them. Okay, and most people think it's all about loan to value, loan to value, loan to value. But that's the wrong way of looking at lending. Ultimately, when you're lending someone money, you are lending the money to them. So let's say we're doing a loan at 75% loan to value, just for argument's sake. Okay, we are funding 75% of the value of that property. Essentially, we are that borrower's majority business partner. So, and we are a stakeholder in their business, like they're a stakeholder in our business. Our interests are aligned. And what a lot of lenders fail to think about is actually we've got to get the borrower right. Because if you get the borrower, a good borrower can create value out of a bad property. A bad borrower, whatever bad means, but a bad borrower can destroy value in a perfectly good property. And if you get the borrower wrong and the borrower destroys value in a property, the property that you think you've lent against on day one is a very different property from the one that you take back on day 365. And
So
therefore, getting the person right is the absolute key to lending.
So based on that, Scott, let me ask you this. As we know, the property education game is blown up over the last 5 to 10 years. Everyone's running courses on everything from, buy to lets to, walking out of a job in Tesco's and going straight into building, huge housing developments, right? And apparently it's all doable. You just need the right mindset, which may or may not be true. I don't know. I'm not in the commercial development game. I did try to break into it, came close, had an offer accepted on a big development in Cambridge. We got to the point of going out trying to raise that private finance to bridge the difference, along with the development finance and all the rest of it. Long story short, didn't end up happening. But the question is it true that someone with no previous experience can go and do a short training course, go out, as long as they can find a deal which does genuinely stack, can they get funding from you?
It's interesting the way you phrase that question at the end. Can they get funding from us, as opposed to can they get funding? So I'm going to give you two different, a slightly nuanced answer. Yes, there will be people that will lend other people money based on them getting third-party cash in to go and do a development. Okay, because they will look at the strength of the other people and the cash that's going in and say, well, actually, I'm comfortable. Whereas from my perspective, the very last thing that we want to do, going back to the history of the business, is we really, really, really don't ever want to be defaulting customers, stepping in, finishing it ourselves, repossessing, selling under a fire sale. That's not what our business is about. And so what we're looking for is that our customers have got some skin in the game, and our customers have got something in the background or have done something which says to us that they are likely to be successful at the project that we're backing them on. Okay. So going and having done a property development course and then getting, without relevant experience, and getting third-party investors in to back them on a project that they don't have the skill set to go and deliver, they would not get funding from us. On the other hand, they may get funding. Now, somebody who, for example, has been on the tools all their life, doing stuff for other people, and has built up technical knowledge, technical skills, but doesn't necessarily have the money, goes and gets the money from somebody else, as a kind of, puts together a sort of business with someone with the money and someone with the experience. Those, even though they haven't done something themselves before, actually they are backable, because in our view, they'd have the technical skills to go and deliver the project successfully.
Okay. So let me give you a make believe situation, and you tell. Just playing a game here. I'm interested because the training companies tell you one thing, and they do say there are companies that are doing phenomenally well, and people are going there with no property experience, doing the 3-day course, going onto the mastermind with the aim to go straight into building large scale developments. Right. So I'm a car mechanic. I've been doing it for 20 years. I've done one of these short training courses. I've gone out and, by some way of a miracle, I've secured a deal. It's £1 million. I've got Aunt Mabel, who's just lent me 250 grand. And I'm out trying to bridge the gap. And I come to you, the numbers are good. I've got a building team on side that are willing to take on the deal. They've got experience. They've built lots and lots of different developments. Are you going to lend to me, Scott?
Let me ask you some questions, Alex. So obviously you're a mechanic, so you're good with your hands. Okay. Yep. But are you putting cash into the deal yourself?
Only Aunt Mabel's that she's lent me.
Only Aunt Mabel's. Okay. Are you putting, have you got any other property assets in the background?
I own my own.
Instead of, so it means that instead of you putting hurt cash into the deal, you can put effectively equity from other properties that you own into it that we can consider as the equivalent of cash.
Well, I've got my residential house that I live in that I've got a mortgage on, and then I've got one buy to let up in Manchester. It's worth about 150 grand.
Okay, also mortgaged on a buy-to-let.
A mortgage, 75%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So from our perspective, I would, and again, going right back to the history of the business, a moment of success for me. And again, this is why maybe I sort of struggled in the earlier stages of the business, is that, I'd come and I'd meet you face to face, Alex. I'd
Hmm.
understand a bit about you, your background, what you've done, how you've got to where you've got to, what you're trying to achieve.
You personally would
And
do that?
yeah, in the early days, absolutely. In the early
Really?
days of the business, not so much anymore, but in the early
Oh,
days.
not now. Okay. Mhm.
I do still go and meet customers that are doing more complex stuff or
Mhm.
doing bigger stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but the principle's the same, which is I'd want to understand you. And if I or the team here felt that the project was beyond your skill set, your ability, and Aunt Mabel's money was at risk,
Mhm.
obviously as well as our own, but Aunt Mabel's money was at risk, and you stood to lose rather than to gain, even if we would be the winners as a lender, I would say, Alex, I'm going to be honest with you, I would start with something smaller. And if
Mm.
you start with something smaller and you build up your skill set and you build up your knowledge and you make your mistakes on something that's affordable to you and Aunt Mabel, let's stay in touch. We'll back you on something that's smaller and more realistic. You can cut your teeth, make some mistakes, and we'll help you build your business collaboratively.
Mm.
So the answer to, and I have done that before. I've gone to meetings and I've said, Alex, I'm going to be honest, you're a great guy. This is not a deal that we want to back. And my advice to you would be, don't do it at all, because you potentially could lose your trousers on this, because this deal is beyond the skills that you've got.
Really, really interesting. Okay, so in a nutshell, and it's advice that I, completely agree with. You would say the best thing that you could probably do, let's say, start with maybe doing a couple of HMOs, for example, like a couple of small
Yeah,
scale HMO conversions or something, and work your way up to the,
yeah.
developments and bigger, commercial stuff.
The best way of putting it is, in life, some of the best deals you ever do are the ones that you don't do.
Mm.
And there is nothing wrong in saying no to a transaction because it's beyond where your skill set, where your you know what your abilities are, because you do not want to be losing Aunt Mabel's money. You do not want to be, you're going into this project to make money, and you've got to mitigate all the risks as much as possible. And a bit like, if I think about how I built Roma, my first loan was 75 grand, my second loan was 200 grand, my third loan was 365 grand. I didn't write a deal for £1 million until I'd written, I think, 1,000 loans. I
Mm.
didn't write a deal for maybe 500 loans, but I didn't write a deal for £2 million. So I think my first £1 million loan, so I wrote my first loan December 2010. I didn't write a deal for £1 million until 2018. I didn't write a loan for £2 million until 2021. Okay, and you just slowly catch your monkey. And what I mean by that is there is nothing wrong with, layering experience on experience and making your mistakes on stuff where, it's a bit like this. You walk into a casino with £1 million. Okay, do you put that £1 million on black?
I
Okay,
read.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. You walk in with 100 quid and you spread it around a bit and you have a bit of fun. Okay, but you spread it around a bit, and property development is no different. You have, I must have done in my career 20,000 transactions, at least 20,000 transactions. I'm still learning something new on almost every single loan that I write. And property
Always
is
learning.
property is something else. And if your knowledge is narrow, but the skills that you need are broad, which is true for property development in particular, actually the best thing you can do is to build on the skills that you've gained and do it in a way that you're mitigating risk. Because yes, you can make lots of money on property, absolutely, but property is never going to go out of fashion. There is a material shortage of homes in this country, and that isn't going to be fixed in a 5-year parliament as the new government saying it's going to be fixed. It just isn't. This is a 10, 15-year project. So, you can gain the experiences that you need for property development on doing stuff that, you use the examples of HMOs, tarts and turn, fixes and flips, doer-uppers, gain all that, refurb to the refurb to rent schemes, all of those things. You can gain the knowledge. Not only that, but you also gain the contacts. And going back to the builder that you've got on site, which is the point that you made earlier. If you've never worked with them before, how do you know they're any good? You want to build the relationships slowly, because you will make mistakes.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that that people maybe don't seem to realize that are going on a lot of training courses now. I've been on them myself, where you walk in, you haven't done any deals, and I was more advanced than some other people that was in the room, and literally on day one, you're calling up and making offers on huge deals with no experience, no idea how you're going to fund them, and it's all this pie in the sky bullshit, in order to kind of get you on the course. But I don't think people. It's a long play, commercial development. You might do a deal today, but you might not recognize anything back out that deal for like 18 months or 2 years down the road. So that's something that you need to consider with whatever position you're in. If your back's up against the wall a little bit and you need money fast, you might need to be looking at some other strategies first before you go down the development road, right?
As I say, often say, and I use it as a bit of a phrase, really, but Roma wasn't built in a day.
Clever.
Thank you. It's not the first time I've said it. All roads lead to Roma, however. But anyway, the point is, though, is that when you're doing property development, here's an example. You've got to have significant wool on your back, so that if something goes wrong, you can trade through that challenge. I'll give you one example. Let's say that you've got, you're there, the example you gave, you're Alex, you're a car mechanic, you've got Aunt Mabel who's putting some cash in, you're doing a development, okay? And you've got a project manager or a QS or a builder, and you're trusting them to do the work. Let's say the lender's QS comes out and says, not happy with the quality of this, that, or the other. Or let's say it's not even a lender's QS. Let's say it's building control. And building control says, not happy with those foundations. You need to dig those foundations out and redo them. Go another meter deeper. The builder says to you, well, we thought it was all okay. Someone's got to fund the remedial work to take those foundations out, go another meter deeper. The ground workers need to be paid again, because they were just acting under instructions of the original that they were given originally. Someone has to pay for all of that. So on a development, there are lots and lots of things that can go wrong. And if you don't have the wool on your back to absorb those extra costs that a lender or Aunt Mabel can't fund, how are you going to trade through? So, that example where the foundations have been done and they're not sufficient, building control went past them. The lender isn't going to give you any money for those works that have been done because they haven't been done right.
Yeah.
So you've got to have experience, and you've got to have cash in the bank or working capital to be able to trade through challenges, because on 30% of the developments that we take on, that we fund, our customers do need extra time. They do need extra money, and these are the people that are experienced.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened to us, Scott, on that development that we had secured in Cambridge. It had planning, or it had outline planning. I can't remember the exact details, but there was so we was told, just a couple of loose ends that needed tying up in order to get this thing going. So we made our offer, we done our numbers, everything stacked beautifully on paper. We got the offer accepted. And then, thank God, before we exchanged, we went a lot deeper into the planning. We had it looked at by a few different people, our architect, a couple of other people. And because it was slap bang city centre of Cambridge, there was all of these hidden bits and pieces that we'd need to adhere to that basically no one could give us a solid cost on until they started, but they were guessing that it could be like another £250,000 just to meet these additional bits and pieces that would need to be done because of where it was located. Vibration surveys and this and that and green roofs and all this stuff that was kind of hidden, and the whole thing fell over. But if we'd have exchanged and not known that, Aunt Mabel would have been in trouble big time.
And that's where it was. On the other hand, if you'd started with something small, you would have gained. Listen, I don't think you'd ever seen something like that if you'd started small. It would take a long time to get there. But going back to what I said before, some of the best deals you ever do are the ones that you don't do, and that sounds like one of the best deals you ever did was the one that you didn't do.
Absolutely. Come back to what I know. If you love to travel like me and you understand the power in escaping the money for time exchange trap, but you just don't know how to do it, then building an Airbnb consultancy business could be exactly what you have been looking for. Right now in the UK, there is a completely untapped opportunity through helping struggling Airbnb hosts by turning around their underperforming properties and generating you huge commission payments in the process. We are going to teach you all of the tools and all of the techniques that we've learned over the last 5 years through building our very own multiple six-figure Airbnb business, arming you with everything that you need to swoop in and save the day. Minimal startup costs, zero risk, and almost unlimited potential. Sound good? Welcome to the Airbnb Consultant. Contact us through any of the channels included in the studio notes to get the conversation started. You touched on it real briefly earlier about the new incoming government. I, like a lot of people, I think here in the property game are pretty puckered up at the minute, like waiting to see what's coming, because I feel like anyone who's taken some chances, really worked hard to create anything, they're the ones that are going to be kind of beaten up in the upcoming budget. How do you feel about the future of the property game in the UK? Obviously, there's going to be opportunities for people who are providing the government with the things that they desperately need. But what about the smaller guys, that have small portfolios, maybe buy-to-let portfolios, that aren't going to be building these huge housing developments for the government? How do you see the future for us?
So, can I just sort of clarify the question a bit? Is the question, again, because it's a different answer depending on which part of the property space you're in, is the question, what do you see as the future for small-time property developers? Or is the question, what do you see as the future for small landlords? I think it's a different answer.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it wasn't a very clear question. I guess the question, in a more blanket term, is how do you see the future for business owners and entrepreneurs and people that are trying to do well for themselves and their families under a Labour government?
So I'm going to give you a slightly nuanced answer if I can. Okay, and I don't think it's just Labour. I think it's also the Tories as well. So if you think that corporation tax went from 19% to 25%, okay, let's say we make £5 million as a business, okay, in a year. That extra 6% of tax on our profits. So 6% of 5 million quid is 300 grand. Okay, so £300,000. Think about the number of people we could have employed with being able to retain £300,000 worth of profit in our business.
Yeah.
Okay. Think about the number of customers that we could have supported doing property development schemes if we didn't have to go and pay the government £300,000 in extra corporation tax. So I have no problem. Obviously, I'm a business owner, but I've no problem with making it harder for business owners to take cash out of a business. Okay, but I have a real problem with not incentivizing companies to go and reinvest back in those companies, to go and employ more people, to grow productivity and grow businesses. And if I look at a recent successful economy in Europe, it's Ireland. Okay,
Okay.
Ireland corporation tax 15%. What's happened? A load of foreign investment's gone into Ireland, and the Irish economy has been absolutely done fantastic things since the credit crunch. Okay, they speak our language. They're inside the EU. Okay, and you've got 25% corporation tax here. You've got 15% corporation tax over there. If I was a foreign investor, where would I go and put my investment? I can put my investment in the place that speaks English. They've got fantastic connections with the States. They're part of Europe, and they've got a low tax regime. So I have, companies should be encouraged to reinvest back in those businesses, to employ new people, and to grow. It's a different thing entirely with how you treat dividends, how you treat salary, etc. But businesses should be encouraged to reinvest back in those businesses. And I think that the regime that we've gone in under the previous government actually is an anti-business regime. And we should be encouraged to employ people and reinvest.
Yeah, I'll be the first to put my hand up and say you're a hell of a lot smarter man than I am. But I'm not an economist, but I do even understand, the most basic principles that I can work out is that, if you don't support the companies that are creating the jobs, and support you guys, and other businesses, then a country just can't run. You're choking it off, because where's the incentive, like you just said, for people to come and invest here? It doesn't exist when there's so many other better places. And I can't see that getting any better over the coming few years. It's only going to get worse. And I can't understand the opposite way of thinking of a socialist government, of how that could ever possibly work.
There's a whole host of things. I don't. Going back to when the private health sector was first started, all of the NHS hospitals used to have private wings, where somebody could go and pay money to have private treatment. It was the NHS hospitals that benefited from those private treatments, and that money went back into the NHS. It was a Labour government that abolished all of that, and said that you can't have a private wing within an NHS hospital. It's unsocialist. So then what happened was that businesses were formed over there. Instead of the investment or the profits that were generated by those private wings going back into the NHS, they've just gone external. It's the same thing with what's happening with VAT on private schools. Fees. Okay, what will happen is private schools are going to struggle because some people will not be able to afford the extra 20% on top of the school fees. So they'll take their kids out of private schools, and you will see that there is all of a sudden more of a burden in the state sector, where there is already not enough teachers, not enough seats, not enough schools. So where's all that money for those extra pupils in the state system going to come from? Instead, it'd be a much better if the public sector and the private sector could work hand in glove, recognizing that some people do want to pay for additional services or to be dealt with faster or different education, and let the state system benefit from private enterprise. Whereas a socialist government says no one's allowed to have private health or private school fees, whatever, and so they turn it off completely, and then they overburden the state system. You've got to understand that there are people that can afford things. They do want to pay for stuff, but the state system should be able to benefit, because ultimately those people are paying twice anyway. They're paying once with their taxes into the state system. They're not then using the state system. They're paying again to have it done privately. Well, how fantastic would it be if the state system could benefit from the people that want to be treated in a different way? But unfortunately, so many times people that run the state are not commercially minded. They're not business people. They don't get the commercial reality of how the world works, and it can be incredibly frustrating. And I think that we're already seeing some worrying signs as to what the new government is talking about doing in the budget for October.
Yeah, he's already priming us for that, isn't he?
Instead of thinking to themselves, how can we reduce, perfect example, the welfare budget is just burgeoning at the moment. Instead of thinking to themselves, well, actually, how can we tackle the real problems, make the country cheaper to run, okay, make the country more efficient, make it, increase productivity. They're saying, how can we, going back to the recent paper, first thing they did was they went and gave the striking people the pay settlements that they wanted. So all of a sudden there's a black hole. Okay, so black hole gets created, and so the people that are creating the wealth then have to then shoulder the burden to go and pay more.
Fill it up. Yeah.
Fill up. It's wrong. What should be happening is to say, well, actually, let's look let's look at how can we get more people back into work. For example, we would need less immigration. Okay, and immigration is not a bad thing. Immigration is a good thing because it brings skills into the country. It brings, it brings entrepreneurial people into the country.
Some immigration does.
Yeah,
immigration.
Yeah, it's a good thing because a country benefits from it. The issue comes when the immigrants that are coming to the country don't contribute to the tax system.
They're just going to take.
They just take from the tax system, and I think that we need to really think about, almost as a commercial enterprise, to say, well, actually, how do we reduce the burden of those that don't contribute? Okay, that's different from the people that can't contribute. Okay, because people that can't contribute need to be supported. But how can we reduce the burden from the people that won't contribute, and reduce the burden on the people that can?
Yeah, and on the migration issue, which is probably one of the biggest problems that's facing the country at the moment, and when pushed and questioned about, well, leading up to the election and still, how are you going to tackle these small boats that are pouring into the country? Well, we need to process them quicker, which can only possibly lead to one thing. If you're processing them quicker and granting asylum quicker to these, what is that? And no wonder they're over there, applauding and cheering and letting off party poppers when they got elected, because what other thing could that possibly create other than more people coming on more small boats?
The Rwanda scheme, whether you like the Rwanda scheme or not, the idea was that was not going to be it was a deterrent.
Yes,
it was a deterrent. It was a very, very, very clever deterrent to stop people coming from. As soon as Rwanda went live, a whole load of people, illegal immigrants that were in Northern Ireland, went to Southern Ireland, okay, because they didn't want to get the risk of being deported to Rwanda. So they went to Southern Ireland where they haven't got it in place. It's started to stem the problem.
And ironically, the human rights lawyers that stood in the way and stopped that from actually ever happening are now responsible for hundreds, if not thousands, more people drowning in the Channel that are still going to try and come over based off the back of those decisions. Yep. So the irony is just out of control. But okay, so without getting stuck in the weeds on politics, it's safe to say that you're not massively optimistic about the next few years with a Labour government.
I think the other thing to think about is that there are lots of things to be positive about in property, because they're saying they're going to support the property sector, this property space, etc., and that's great. But if they build the wrong type of properties in the wrong areas, it will lead to an oversupply. It will lead to then the end values coming down, and also, you think about it, where's all the materials going to come from? Where's all the labour going to come from? If there's a massive push on building, and we haven't got the people to go and build, because you're not pushing them through colleges, there's not the apprenticeships, there's not the training schemes, there's not all the grassroots stuff that you need, then that will be inflationary in terms of labour rates. And the materials, where's all the materials going to come from? That will be inflationary on materials. So you could potentially be faced with a situation where, if all the shackles are taken off too quickly, where you've got massively inflationary costs on both materials and labour, and you've got a deflationary environment on the end values, which means that, well, actually, why would anybody go and build? Because they're not going to make money.
But don't you think this is the root of the whole problem, Scott? Is that you know this stuff because you're educated, you know about politics, you know about business, you know about inflation, you know about how the world works. But when Keir Starmer stands up there and says, we're just going to build lots more houses and we're going to solve the housing crisis overnight. If the majority of the population don't know what you just reeled off in 30 seconds, which basically blows that whole thing out the water and makes it blaringly obvious that it's not that easy to do because of all the knock-on consequences. That's what's wrong time and time and time again with government, is that the people that are voting them in don't really understand what they're voting for.
I think the issue is more one of short-termism rather than long-termism. So if you look at if you look at this is, and I'm not a fan of autocracies, but just if you just take China as an example, 50 years ago, the Chinese put in place a long-term growth plan. Okay. And, they've had stability of government, whereas here, because, at most it's a 5-year cycle, governments have got to try and achieve the unachievable in a very, very short window. And there is a lot to be said for, saying to yourself, it's a bit like when you are planning a career, for example, you're thinking about where, or you're thinking about getting married, which is the ultimate partnership. You think about, where am I going to be in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, 20 years' time? You've got much more of a long-term vision, whereas a government is only really ever interested in a period of 3, at most 4 years, because the last year they're trying to prime everything so they can keep their jobs and get re-elected again. There's no real long-term thinking, and it's a massive issue. We need to find a way in Western democracies where we can have long-term vision, long-term planning, whether it is cross-party collaboration over key things, whether that be defence, whether that be health, whether that be education. There should be absolute. Those should not be political things. Our security should not be political. Our healthcare should not be political. Our education system should not be political. People should have a long-term view as to what is right, and all parties should be, that's the right approach. And it's too short-termism, and it also leads to instability, and it gives our adversaries, it gives them an advantage over our societies.
Yeah, exactly. Really good stuff there, Scott. So moving on from politics, getting back to your day-to-day life in the bridging world, in the finance world, what would you say if I said to you that, some of the things that I hear a lot in the property game and getting thrown around in the courses and in the groups and stuff is, bridging finance, development finance, it's so expensive. It's too expensive. And now I feel like there's this big push in this growing space of people that are going out and trying to fund deals purely through private investors. There's people running, 3-day events on how to raise private finance and how to make the perfect investor pitch pack and, all this kind of stuff. So I feel like there's a lot of people that are kind of turning against development finance and bridging finance because it is seen to be so expensive. So what would you say to that? And without, I don't want to sound naive, I understand that, you deal with a lot of the big boys, and I'm not talking about the big boys. I'm talking about the kind of people that are a little bit, a few ranks down below the big boys. Obviously, they need the commercial lending. So what would you say to the people that are a little bit further down the ranks that are scared of the rates that you guys charge?
So let me give you an example, if I can, because if you simply look at price and cost, you'd never do anything. Let's say a development loan is going to cost you 15% per annum, say, and it's £1 million facility. Okay, so in theory, if the release is on that £1 million facility on the development loan, are linear. I know that they're not linear, but let's say they're linear. Okay. And let's say your average balance over that 12-month period is therefore £500,000. Okay. The real cost of that money isn't the 15% because you're only paying interest on what you've drawn. Okay. The real cost of that is 7.5% because you've only drawn half of the average balance of half of that money over the 12-month period. That's number one. Number two is you've got to look at it as a sprat to catch a mackerel, insofar as
I love your sayings, by the way. I'm loving it. I'm going to make notes of these sayings.
it very much is. If you think very narrow as to, well, this is, if it's going to cost me an average of 7.5% over the 12-month period, the reality is that if you've got a scheme that's going to make you 25-30%, okay, you can't do that project without bricks, cement, labour, plaster, tiles, etc. The thing that is the single most important thing for your project is cash and liquidity. And the premium, if you want to call it a premium, the premium that you pay for having a lender that's got your back during a project, that gives you the liquidity, that gives you the speed, that gives you the flexibility, that is good for it, okay, is huge. Now, it may be that a private investor is the right answer, okay, because they've got the speed, flexibility, agility, understand what they're doing, etc. It may be that actually you're better off with a business like Roma that has got the depth of pockets to support you, the track record, the reference points, that other customers in your area that they've worked with, that they can, that you can reference them through. The most important thing is doing your due diligence, and I talk a lot about a borrower doing due diligence on their lender, and it doesn't matter whether that lender is Roma Finance or the private investor that you've talked about. Okay, if you choose the wrong partner, whether that be a business like Roma, or whether that be a private investor, a bad business partner can destroy value in a perfectly good business. And choosing the right partner that you can build a strong working relationship with is absolutely the key to success. And if it costs you a bit more, okay, so what? The reality is that if you choose the right partner, that partner will be the key that unlocks the door for you, that makes you makes your transaction successful. And I'm not advocating that that answer is Roma Finance, okay, but for many people it is. It may be that actually the right business partner for you is Aunt Mabel, who's backing their nephew.
Aunt Mabel's got a lot of money. She's helping a lot of people
backing
out
their
there
nephew.
today.
Well, yes, I think it's all going to be taken off her in the budget. So she might as well give it to her nephew Alex. But to help him on his journey. But the point I'm making is, if price is the most important thing to you on a transaction, you will always only ever try to get the money from a bank. And by the time you've got the money from a bank, the deal would have come and gone. And therefore, the most important thing for you to focus on is, how can I build a relationship with a strategic partner that's going to help me grow my business?
So you kind of lead me into my next question quite nicely. Well, you've kind of answered it in some ways, but there's, it's quite a busy market that you're in. There's you're doing great things. I've heard of you. Pretty much everyone I know has heard of you. But there are other people doing the same thing. Why should I go with Roma as opposed to one of the other 100 development bridging finance companies out there? What are your unique traits? How are you going to make me feel comfortable going into this, scary, big deal that I'm contemplating taking on?
It's interesting. I'm going to flip that round on its head if I can. Okay, which is going back to what I was saying before. When you're taking a residential mortgage, okay, you're taking a buy-to-let mortgage. It is effectively a single bullet transaction, and then you're paying monthly you pay monthly. If it's a bridging loan that you're taking, it's a single bullet loan where you've got a repayment at the end of that term. Okay, where you are taking a development loan or any loan with further drawdowns, the single most important thing is the relationship that you build with that provider of finance, because that provider of finance, the fact that they can move quickly, the fact that they're flexible, the fact that they can be on site, the fact that they've got deep pockets, the fact that they funded, Alex and Art Mabel down the road on their previous transactions, that they've had a good experience. Where you need an ongoing relationship with a funder or a financier that knows and understands what they're doing, that is the most important thing, because on a development, cash is king. And if you are working with a partner that doesn't understand that and can't give you the money quickly, can't support you if things take longer or cost more or things don't go to plan, either because they're strapped and they're at their maximum exposure, or it's not their money, or they've reached the limits of what they can do, actually you can be penny wise and pound poor. Because the moment that you've not got the liquidity to either pay your suppliers or to pay your subbies on site, your project is you've got big problems. And
So should we?
So by way of example, one of the things that we're very, very hot on, and I'm sorry for the long answer, but one of the things that we're very, very hot on is how can we support our customers making the drawdown process quicker, faster, easier to give we know that our customers need to pay their subbies on site on a Friday. Okay, so we are all over our customers on a Wednesday to say, what money do you need by Friday? How many developers do you know where the lender is chasing them to give them the drawdowns?
That sounds like something that would be very nice to have, for sure. So should we, Scott, be doing, because what you just said was quite interesting about, whether the lender could potentially be a little bit strapped. Now, I would imagine for most developers that are at least at the early stage of their development game, they're just trying to get funded, right? So if somebody offers them the money, they're probably just going to bite their arm off. What they're probably not going to do is go, okay, the offer's there. Now we need to go and do a little bit of research and make sure they can actually follow through. Is that something that developers should be doing?
I talk a lot. Yeah, I talk a lot about the due diligence that a borrower should do on a lender. Where does that lender's money come from? Who have they funded in my area? Can I go and speak to those developers to understand what it's like to work with that business? Is it actually their own money that they're even lending? Where does that money come from? Is that from a family office? Is it from peer-to-peer? Is it from institutions? Is it their own? You've really, really got to. How many defaults have they had over the last 12 months? How many repossessions have they had? What's the process if I go beyond the term, or if I need more money? How is that supported? The people that own that business, what's their background? For example, if they are property developers themselves and something goes wrong, the likelihood is that they've got the skill set to go and step in and finish it off. Whereas if they're, underwriters by background, just as an example, if they're underwriters by background, they haven't got the skill set to go and finish it off. So therefore, their success moment is going to be more aligned with mine as a developer. They're not going to want to step in and take it over at the end, because that's not their game. If things have gone wrong, what do they do? Who do they work with? Who are their partners? There's lots of due diligence that a borrower should do on a lender in terms of choosing the right firm to work with on a transaction. And just because somebody says, yes, I'll give you the money, actually, that shouldn't be enough. If I think about the due diligence that we do on our borrowers, if I think, I used to know the colour of the bathroom suite in every property that we've ever lent against. And the reason why I did that was because I wanted to understand the people that we were doing business with. The people we're doing business with also understood the people that they were doing business with, because I would open up about Roma, the background, the future, where we're going, how we're formed, what we're looking for. There's not enough work that goes on where borrowers, or brokers for that matter, understand the lender that they are
Mm,
putting the customer with, or the lender that the borrower is choosing to work with. That relationship where you're needing drawdowns to support you on a project, that relationship between lender and borrower is symbiotic. Their
mm,
moments of success are aligned and should be aligned, and
mm,
therefore the relationship they build with each other is absolutely key to success. The trust that they build with each other. Let's say we're doing, I don't know, 85% loan to cost, 100% loan to cost. Okay, we are ultimately that borrower's business partner,
mm. Yeah.
and you
Yeah, I
wouldn't
see
go
that.
into business with somebody that you don't know.
Mm. It's a really
Get
good
to
point.
you should get to know each other.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
opportunities are what opportunities are there
Mm,
for the borrower to meet the lender? What's the lender's background? You need to
mm,
be asking all these questions, and I'm deliberately not giving lots of answers. I'm just trying to be a bit thought provoking around what does good look like.
mm. It's a really good point. And I guarantee it's not something that pretty much anyone, at least starting out, is thinking about or actively doing, researching the lender. When they say yes, it's like, let's go, show me the money. Really, really good information there, Scott. And I can see how much thought and genuine care that you're putting into all of the decisions that you're making, whether or not you're, going to business with these people, essentially. I want to ask you, as we start thinking about wrapping this up, because we're already an hour in, I know you're a busy man. Property Elevator, very popular TV show that you've been involved with. Are you currently still on the panel there? And I know you're a sponsor of the show. So check out Scott on the Property Elevator, which is on Sky TV and on various YouTube channels, I'm sure. But go check that out. Really good show. It's kind of like Dragon's Den, but more specific for property deals and investors that are going out and pitching their projects in front of Scott and John Howard, who was just on, and a few other people. What is the number one biggest mistake that you see on the show, Scott, that people, the reason why they're not getting their deals funded? What's the biggest mistake, number one thing you would say?
Um, I remember when I was at university. You like I like my acronyms, and I used to have a lecturer that said that used to say the 7 Ps: prior preparation and planning prevents piss poor performance.
Mm,
Okay, and often people come into any meeting, any pitch, whether it be on Property Elevator or any first meeting, and they're not prepared. They don't know their stuff. If you know your stuff, you can never get caught out. And often when you get asked something and you don't know the answer to it, the best thing you can do is to say, I'm going to be honest, I don't know the answer to that. Let me find it out and let me come back to you. But if you wing it, or you don't, or you give the answer which is a not truthful answer, you will get found out quite quickly.
And you must be able to completely pull people apart on there when it comes to numbers and the deal. And I'm starting to sweat just imagining standing in front of you getting questioned and quizzed.
Well, possibly, but I hope not. I'd like to think that we create an environment where people, feel comfortable and feel at ease. But again, if you don't know your stuff, the risks are higher that does happen to you.
Mm. Yeah, really. So, are you enjoying being part of that? Is it kind of a nice break to your day-to-day kind of office life to get out
The,
and do some TV work?
the piece of my job that I enjoy the most is meeting people.
Mm.
I get inspired by the customers that we work with. Going back to what I was saying about my background, I'm engineering by trade. I love seeing people that are creating something, and I enjoy backing people on those creation journeys. Effectively, it's engineering, it's building a property, it's creating a residential dwelling, it's creating value out of something that's unloved. If it's a commercial conversion, for example, I love it. And meeting the people, understanding their journeys, a bit like understanding your journey, Alex, or maybe even Aunt Mabel's
Oh,
journey.
Mabel's journey.
Aunt Mabel's journey.
Her
That to
journey's
me.
nearly over. She's getting on.
Well, let's say it's not all taken off her in the budget, and
Yeah.
she can back you on that development project, not one in the centre of Cambridge that you're looking at next, maybe one on the outskirts of Cambridge where you
Yeah,
haven't got to
maybe
worry
that'd be
about
better.
vibration tests.
That's it.
But the point is that the bit I love meeting people. I love being inspired by people that we work with, whether it's people that work within Roma, work with Roma, or borrow from Roma. I get inspiration from the people that we do business with.
Let me ask you this then. You seem like a really genuinely super nice guy, and I think that's why Roma's done so well, is because you've built it on these foundations of genuinely caring about the people that you're working with, which screams out based on what you've said. Let's say that I come to you and I'm like, Scott, I've got this dream. Here's the project. I'm going to do X, Y, Z. I'm going to build this, build that. I'm going to take over. I'm going to blow up the development space. I'm inspiring. I'm exciting. You like me as a person. You see something in, a twinkle in my eye. But the numbers are just not quite there. They're a little skewed. They don't quite make sense. Will you sit down with me and help me to kind of get it to a point where it works? Or will you, let's say if maybe there's a very slight uncertainty in the numbers, but you see a lot in me as a person with the drive and desire and ambition that I've got. Would you ever get to a point where you'll not take a punt, but take like a super calculated risk?
Yeah, often. One of our real skills as a business is our ability to structure deals that are, just outside the margins and make them work from the customer's perspective. But going back to what you were saying earlier, and it's very nice for those kind words. But let me just give you another thing that we say to our people in the business. Okay, and this is really important. We say to our colleagues in Roma that you treat every borrower like they're your grandma or their grandpa. Like they're your grandma or their grandpa. Okay, until such time as they don't treat you like you're their grandson or their granddaughter. Okay, now it might be that it's your Aunt Mabel, which is your auntie, but the principle's the same. In that our interests are always aligned with our customers' interests, because the customer's always king, and until such time as they don't give us the respect that we deserve as their majority business partner or their business partner or transaction. And the moment that someone doesn't tell the truth, someone diverts money away from something that we're funding to something else, that's the point where we get cross and get upset, because we've afforded somebody, all that time and respect, and we hope and we expect it to be mutual. So going back to the question, which is around, if something doesn't quite work, one of the real skills of our business is how can we structure things to make things work. We don't derive, as a business, we do not derive a pecuniary benefit from a loan that doesn't complete, and therefore we're incentivized to try and get deals completed. It's not in our interest to hold up transactions. It's in our interest to actually get them over the line, get them completed. And something that's interesting as well is the way that we incentivize our underwriters. Okay, our underwriters, they earn a percentage of the profit that the business makes when a loan redeems, but they would also lose money if the deal was loss-making. So, and they don't get paid until the end. So our underwriters, they're motivated and incentivized. Those interests are aligned, A, with our business, and B, with our borrowers' businesses. So they're incentivized on quality. So if something comes along and there's a deal that's, going back to your example, that's marginal, our underwriters and our salespeople will spend the time trying to craft it and structure it so that it does work. The most important thing is that our borrower makes money at the end of the project. Because if our borrower makes money at the end of the project, then and they've had a good taste of working with us, it's likely they want to come back and repeat the process.
Yeah, so it's everybody has to win kind of business strategy, which makes complete sense. Sounds good, Scott. Last couple of questions here, so you can go on and go off and keep funding deals. What would you say to 21-year-old Scott or 18-year-old Scott who's kicking off today, what would you do different? What advice would you give to yourself with hindsight, knowing what you know now? What would you say?
If I think about my history since I was 13 years old, I think I've been sacked 4 times. I've been made redundant 5 times. So I've had a lot of knocks throughout my career. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, because the mistakes that, well, not even mistakes, the bad things that happen to you on your journey, often you can learn the most from the challenging environments that you've been in. And I think that as a society generally, we don't celebrate failure enough.
It's frowned upon and seen as a failure and a disappointment rather than a learning.
100%. And if I think about the business that Roma is today, parts of the reasons why Roma is the business it is today is because of the issues and the challenges that I've had in my career. And so, I've been an employee in a toxic environment. I've been a borrower I've worked in a business where they don't treat their customers properly. I've worked in businesses where they don't treat their staff properly. I've seen where a business has failed, and I've been on the other side of the fence in that business that's failed. But all those things have taught me lessons in life that have helped me shape the business into what it is today, which is very much a borrower-friendly, customer-friendly. I try and phrase it: we are an aspirational business to work for and an aspirational business to work with. And that's where we're trying to pitch ourselves. That, going back to your question around, development finance is expensive. Yes, it is. But actually, there is, there's a reason why an Apple iPhone is more expensive than a Nokia brick. It's because
I don't quite know why. The Nokia's battery life was fantastic, way better than my £1,000 iPhone. But no, I understand.
It's a principle. There's a reason why somebody will drive a Daimler rather than a Dacia. Both will get you from A to B in the same time frame, given speed limits and what have you. They'll both get you from A to B in the same time frame. One is a much more enjoyable experience than the other. One's much
the other
more
one, you arrive in a ball of fire with 3 wheels left on.
Sometimes, to have the sweet taste of a good experience, you have to pay a slight premium for that. And if I think about the way that we are a bit more expensive than other people, but there's a reason why we're funding currently 550 odd developers around the country doing projects. Why they don't go to a bank or to a slightly cheaper lender, it's because they've got the sweet taste of working with a lender that understands them, their business, their journey, and what they're trying to achieve.
I can understand that. Once it's a very, very serious game that you're playing in, very and you want to make sure that you're in business with the right people, 100%. So just lastly here, Scott, you got a big business, a lot of money, a lot of stress, a lot of people, a lot of responsibility riding on your shoulders, 60 odd employees, tens of millions, I don't know, hundreds of millions of lending out there. I'm not sure what numbers you're doing, but it's a big business. Balancing that with like your family life, family man, father, husband, how's the stress levels and the mental health aspect around juggling all of that? Mental health's a big thing these days. A lot of people out there struggling. Social media looks like everybody's doing great, but we know that's mostly a lie. Do you have any down days? Do you struggle? Do you have any kind of challenges? If you're open to being honest and vulnerable about it, like, do you have any challenges with running all this business and a family as well?
I think that first of all, I think that work-life balance is one of my biggest challenges. I'd love to say that I've got that balance right, but I haven't. If I think that I've just come back from 2.5 weeks away, I worked every single day whilst I was away, despite having a fantastic team. Honestly, a fantastic team within the business. There were 3 or 4 things that I should have got over that I would have liked to have got over the line before I went away, in which case I would have turned my phone off. I would have turned my emails off, but I didn't get them over the line in time. And so I had to do some work whilst I was away. And work-life balance is something that I need, that personally I need to work more on. I suppose the challenge that I've got is that I actually enjoy it. I think that, I live, eat, sleep and breathe the business. I do think about it 24/7. I'm incredibly, proud of what we've achieved and the people that are working in the business. And I honestly have a fantastic team, but work-life balance is something that I do need to work on. And you've found a bit of an Achilles heel for me, if I'm honest, in that, I'd love to be able to spend more time with the family, spend more time doing. I love sport, so spend more time doing sport, more time traveling. But
do you feel like you've had to make?
sacrifice.
Do you feel like you've had to make the big sacrifice then to get to where you are, and that's like an ongoing thing? You're not really at this point seeing a kind of way that could resolve itself?
If I think back to, when I took on my first colleague back in January 2014 to get the business, and people often, you touched on this earlier on in the podcast, when it's Dan Hill who's still with me, when he started, the two of us would get into the office at 6:30 in the morning, and we would work through until 9 o'clock at night. And we did that, and then I was also going to see the customers, or the applicants, I should say. I'd go and see those applicants Saturdays and Sundays. And so I worked for 6.5 days a week for, a big portion of the business's infancy. I'm not working 6.5 days a week anymore, but I do, you'll be the same if you're running an HMO business or an Airbnb business. You'll be the same around your tenants or your guests in your properties. You'll want to give them.
It's all consuming.
It's all consuming. And Roma is no different. I love it, but my weakness is the fact that I do love it. And I'm working hard on trying to get a better work-life balance. Sometimes I do better than other times, but it's definitely work in progress.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I appreciate the honesty. The only reason I ask is because it's easy for the listeners to see and hear and listen to all of my guests and think that everything's, perfect, and but everyone makes sacrifice and everybody struggles with something. So appreciate the honesty. So just closing up, Scott, is there anything, what opportunities have you got going on right now? Have you got any anything that people could use or go out and find on you? You got any books going on? Have you got any promotions with Roma? What exciting things are going on in your world?
I think that we've had our record. Q2 was our best ever quarter of trading. So we wrote 320 loans in Q2 of this year. Wow. And in July, which was the first month of Q3, in that month alone, we did 120. Which was our best ever month, better than the previous quarter on a kind of like-for-like basis. So we are growing. We are bringing out new products all of the time. And one of the things that we do, and this is a really interesting one, is if we're starting off with a development, okay, when that development, so a development loan is the most expensive loan, most expensive product, okay, because highest risk. When that development becomes wind and watertight, that becomes eligible for it to be a bridge. So the fact that the customer has successfully de-risked our loan, we will pass on a cheaper product to that customer. How many lenders do you know that will say, Alex, you've done a fantastic job. You're doing great. I'm going to make your loan cheaper.
I haven't heard of that.
And that's one of the things that we do. So as a customer de-risks our business, so we want to de-risk their business and pass on a saving to them. And then when the property becomes, if they've got a retention strategy, if once the property is finished and becomes income producing, we can switch it from being a bridging loan or a development loan if they're still on a development loan. We can switch it from a bridge or dev loan onto a buy-to-let within a week. And we do our own buy-to-lets. And so the
Okay.
same valuer will see it all the way through, so you've got no valuation risk. The same lawyer will do the work, and we'll do separate rep with the development at the beginning, but we'll do dual rep with the conversion onto a buy-to-let mortgage at the end. And that means that our customer can go into a transaction with us, going back to your original point about it being expensive, knowing that the exit route is quick, easy, and hopefully pain-free. And so, what we're trying to do is de-risk our business by working with great customers. But from a customer perspective, they can de-risk their business by working with a great lender that can back them on that journey. And we call that the customer for life. And you will see a lot more over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months around how, as a business, we can promote what we call the customer for life products, where actually we are helping our customers not just de-risk their business and give them the liquidity they need for their projects, but also offer them lending solutions so that they can move on to the next project.
Yeah, amazing. So you've almost got it all in house, which just makes it all so much easier as well to flip flop between the. I like that on the exit that you can also do the buy to let stuff or whatever they need. So that's really, really good to know. So, guys, sounds like an absolute no brainer for those of you who are listening at home. If you're looking to go down the development road, or if you're in the early stages or looking to grow, then you definitely need to get in touch with Scott at Roma Finance and get involved with these guys, because it just seems like a one-stop shop. Scott, amazing conversation. There's so much more that I wanted to ask you, but we're already well over the usual time. So we'll wrap things up here. Is there anything lastly that you wanted to add to our listeners? Any other tidbits or value or bits of advice that you wanted to add at the end?
Yeah, the thing that's most important is that the relationship that you can build with a lender is absolutely key to you being successful as a developer. And so think beyond price. Think that it's all people. How can you build relationships with great people that will help you to grow your business?
Yeah. Business is a people's game. Property is even more of a people's game. It's about your network, your contacts, who you know, who you're working with, creating those power teams. And that's what's going to take you over the finish line, right? So completely agree. Scott, we're going to put all of your information in the show notes. So how to contact Scott, social links, websites, all that stuff will be in the show notes. So you can contact Scott directly and go out and get your projects financed. So Scott, lastly, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really, really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man. And guys, thank you so much as well for everybody listening and watching at home. Until next week, we'll see you then for another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. Until then, take care. Thank you. Goodbye. Thanks again, Scott.